Recording in progress. Oh, are we doing all from the beginning?
In the Pop Culture Cupid podcast, we talk about how pop culture influences our expectations in relationships. I'm Alison, love coach, here to help you single people find your way back to love.
Healthy communication. I'm Michelle. I help singles embrace themselves and their singleness, as well as develop a healthy self-relationship. We bring some juicy stories from our own love lives and dating, and it gets pretty interesting. Be focused, we're gonna be to the point, and no digressing.
Self-awareness. Follow, share, subscribe, enjoy.
And like and comment.
If it's shockingly bad, we just re-record another one.
Yeah. No, I think there's some good stuff that you can just nitpick. Recording in progress. I'm trying to think of more original ways to say it, but I just want to repeat it.
It's the added thing at the end is Michelle just asked me, like, should we change outfits? Like, no, who cares? Like, we're not.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
My God. Yeah. I just don't want people to think that we're slobs and we're just wearing the same thing week after week. But
for a month, because this is our 4th episode.
Yeah, but
okay.
Yeah, I'm like, no, people understand. But you know, we're just not those people who are gonna go change and pretend that it's like a different day. And
no, I can barely breathe properly. I'm not gonna worry about changing my outfit. I'm not like, no. Yeah, because this is the first time that we'll have 4 episodes where we're strictly the same, because we would have 2 episodes, which I feel is acceptable for outfit repeating, but 4 is a bit much. Who cares?
Yes.
This is an audio format. Oh my God, I'm about to sneeze again.
Exactly. Bless you. One hug. No. Look at the light. You don't have light, do you?
This is loud. Anyway,
well,
today's topic. Funny how I say today's topic as if I'm really believing that we were doing this like a separate day. Is vulnerability. Again, back to Love Island, the first episode.
Love is Blind.
Love is Blind. Oh, I always do this.
You always do it. No, it's fine. We'll forgive you. We love you anyway.
Thank you. Love is Blind. There was a lot of vulnerability in the pods in this first episode, because I was talking about, like, you know, when people talk to me about dates and what it is to be a love coach and things like that. And like just yesterday we were at a birthday party and there was this 30-year-old woman who is I mean, not superficial in the sense of only cares about appearance, but superficial in the sense that she gives it a lot of importance, but she's beautiful but has got a lot of depth, and she can only go towards the good-looking boys. And I say boys, not men, because you know they end up being completely immature. And we talk about vulnerability, and it feels like it is becoming a bit of a huge topic, which is great. About you guys need to be more vulnerable, about sharing the deeper stuff, about showing who you really are. Because we talked a bit about Hannah and Nick and how they showed no vulnerability whatsoever, which is probably what's going to lead to the downfall. But other couples, they really shared about how parents got cancer, MS, separation things, childhood things, which is like the hitting the money with vulnerability about this one guy was like ended up crying about how his mother's family kind of left her when she and I was just like, wow, I feel confident that there's going to be a lot of weddings going on in this season, so not sure about what couples at all, and you know, if they're going to last or even say yes. But I think that I was really taken aback about how much vulnerability there was in these first dates, which is great. I mean, I think that's exactly what you need to be doing.
Yeah, I will dare say that it might be a bit easier to be vulnerable in the pods because you're talking to a wall, and it's a bit harder to I mean, there's a lot to say of the fact that there's a camera there, but I think you kind of forget that it's there. But you know, when you're in a room with someone, then they're looking at you, it's much harder. I don't know. That's what personally I feel like when there's someone with me in the room looking at me, there's a real tangible person right in front of me. It's much harder for me to really open up. Whereas let's say you're talking beyond a wall, it's, you know, much easier to like as if I'm gonna make a funny comparison here, but for me, like when I'm recording a reel or recording a video or whatever for something to go online, I feel comfortable doing silly things when I'm at home and no one can see me, even though it's going online, you know? But if I'm outside, I'm gonna feel so awkward recording anything.
Yeah.
For the chance of someone seeing me because of the like, you know, people outside, whatever. So I think it's easier in that sense of like, you know, you don't really see the person in front of you. So it's almost as if you're just talking out loud to an empty room. I will say though that I feel like a lot of times there's also that added extra pressure to be vulnerable as soon as possible because otherwise they're gonna go on to the next match and people just want to gauge who you are right away because it's on a very tight time limit. And for a lot of people, it isn't easy to be that vulnerable, or maybe you're being vulnerable too soon. And I don't know. It's a bit, again, it's like I was saying it beforehand about what we were talking about. Something about it that, you know, it's not real life. Like dating in the pods and dating in real life is very different. And I can understand why in that situation you would have to be like vulnerable as soon as possible because otherwise it's much harder to get to know the person. Yes, I do think that you need to show vulnerability to be able to progress in your relationship. But as someone who takes time to open up, and I was saying also in one of the previous episodes that I can be very cold in the beginning. It's because it's just I don't like being vulnerable with just anyone. And I'm not going to share my whole life story on the first few dates, especially not all at once. I think it's something that, you know, you can gradually share with someone and get to know each other, like, because it's a process, you know, it's not something that you have to dump on someone all at once. But I do think it's very important to show vulnerability for someone to get to know you and understand you and who you are and to be able to trust you because they see that you're sharing with them and you're being open and honest and vulnerable. And so they can do the same with you. It sort of creates like this trust. When you're vulnerable with someone, then they'll feel, you know, they'll be able to
safe.
Be vulnerable with you as well.
But I added to that, it's just when you are being, you know, we talk about being yourself and being vulnerable and things and putting up a front and things like that. And I think when you are choosing to share these touching, intimate stories about yourself, then there is no chance that you'll be clumsy in doing that. Yeah. You know, we were talking about how Nick and Hannah were a bit clumsy with each other, and which is probably going to lead to the fact that it's not going to work out. But all of these other people who kind of like are going into the vulnerable, like nobody, if you are going to be criticizing someone because they cried about how their mother died or has MS or whatever, like you are a bitch. Like you won't, you know, if you're going to talk about something that's deep to your heart and just like so profoundly honest, then you will not, you know, sure, you won't be making the best first impression, but you're not going to be clumsy in doing that. And so you're not going to be creating this image that can be misinterpreted. And I think that's the key. And that's, you know, that's why vulnerability early on, whether it's dating or friendship or work, you know, even for work, you know, don't go crying at your boss on your first day. But if there's something going on with you, I think you've got a better chance of being understood, like saying, listen, something's going on at home, I'm just slightly unwell. You'll be given more grace than if you just end up not doing anything and then looking like you know, you're doing less.
yeah, it's easier to understand where you're coming from and who you are, and and if someone wants to help you and be there for you, it's much easier for them to be able to do so. I will say it's like very exhausting to be vulnerable, especially if you have to be vulnerable with several people while you're dating in those pods. Um, but yeah, it's just part of the process, and it's part of getting to know someone, and it ties back with trusting your gut instinct and knowing who the person you're talking to is, and if you and whether or not you can trust them with your vulnerability,
Yeah.
and whether or not you shouldn't waste it on them, and when you can be vulnerable, when you shouldn't. So
Yeah, I would say that being vulnerable is what you said about waste. I don't think it's ever a waste.
yeah, because you learn from every experience, but
Yeah, exactly. And I think I know what you mean in the sense that,
yeah,
if you're vulnerable with somebody who kind of isn't going to receive it well, it's going to be a bit hurtful. But I still don't think that's a
yeah,
waste. I think, it's just showing who you are and who
yeah,
they are. Um, but yeah, there's a lot, but I would say be vulnerable. You were saying about kind of protecting yourself and being a bit standoffish. I would say the difference between you and I there is because you're a single life coach and you're like, you need to be protecting yourself and you need to be just like deal with who you are first and then start dating.
mm-hmm.
Whereas I'm a dating coach, and so you and I, we speak to different people. You would speak to women who, and men, but probably mostly women who are struggling with being single. So you're going to teach them. So you need to like own yourself. Whereas I'm going to be talking to mostly men actually, but some women as well who struggle to find a relationship. And so I'm going to be telling them like slightly different of just like, okay, what are you like on a date? And if this is somebody who wants to be in a relationship and is dating but isn't working out, I would say you need to be more vulnerable.
Yeah,
But only because they've already done the work. Like they would get to me once they've done the work with you. Do you see what I mean? They
yeah,
would,
yeah,
I would say, okay, now you've been single for a while, but you know what you want. You're clear in what you want. Now you need to kind of show who you are and not this kind of cold facade. But again, because we're talking to different people, and you said it yourself, like with dating and Love is Blind, they all want to be in a relationship, so they need to get to it faster. They need to show who they are faster. Like they need, okay, we need to move on. And what I like about the season is like, except for Hannah, there's going to be a huge episode about Hannah,
yeah,
who's 26. Like they're all in their 30s. I feel like,
yeah.
and so they've all probably gone through these breakups, and I'll need to kind of reassess and yeah, be vulnerable.
Yeah, I think you also need to learn how to be vulnerable, which again can only be done when you trust yourself and your instincts, and you know who you are and you're comfortable with yourself, and you've done this process with yourself first.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
once you do that, you're more capable of being vulnerable in a healthy way, where you're not doing it because you want to force a connection, or
Exactly.
you want to force them to get to know you, you want to, force this thing. Like a lot of times, like when we're in an unhealthy place, and I've done this a lot of times, and you'll have a crush on someone or you're infatuated by them, you want to force a connection and you really want it to work. So you're going to force yourself to be vulnerable with them, to say, here we have vulnerability, and here I could talk to him about this, and he knows me that, and he knows that, and that's not real, because you're forcing it, and and that's not healthy, and then that's going to cause you a lot of trust issues, or it's maybe forcing you also to talk about things that you're not ready to, or with someone that you don't trust enough, or someone who's not going to protect you as they
Yeah.
should. And it also in the aspect of how to convey your vulnerability, when to just spill it out and when to be cautious, and also how to you know, there's a time in my life where I would be vulnerable, and it will come out more dramatic, with more tears, and with more scar, because the scars were more like fresh or whatever it is, and I was less in a less healthy place in my life or whatever it is. And today, where I can be vulnerable but still very composed, or just not spill everything out all at once, or not do it just, you know, in this, I don't know, in this, or in a whiny tone, or in a
Yeah,
some way
exactly.
that can be conveyed differently. And one last thing that came up, that you said something, you can't remember what you said exactly, but you said this word of like trusting them with your vulnerability. There was something you said over there where I think you also want to be able to be vulnerable with, no, sorry. You want to, being vulnerable with someone also helps you understand the other person and see how they react to your vulnerability.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
was
remember how
gonna
it connected
about
with it.
I was talking, you said something about wasting your vulnerability, and I said it's not
Yeah,
wasting. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, exactly, exactly. So then that sort of also gives you a picture, like, how do they react to your vulnerability?
yeah,
And that will tell you a lot about the person.
yeah. Completely agree with that. And it is a bit of a risk. I mean, being vulnerable, it's a bit of a risk. And I had a huge,
Yeah,
not a huge argument, but like a heated debate with my godmother around vulnerability, and she doesn't like the word. And I said, but it is being vulnerable, because she argues that talking about this type of thing is showing strength and things like that. It's like, I agree,
yeah,
it's showing strength of character, but it is opening up your soft spot that,
yeah,
that it's easily kind of targetable. um if you're talking about my own relationship with JT, where I'm definitely not going to talk about his soft vulnerable spots, but it's stuff that came up fairly early in our relationship, about his past, about his parents and things like that. And yeah, he showed strength in character about talking about it with me. And now,
yeah,
it's the sad the scary truth is that I have the power to hurt him with it.
yeah,
And
exactly.
that's what being vulnerable is. It's, if you're going to talk about something, that there's a risk of the other person hurting you, then that's vulnerability. And it's not a bad thing, but that's just the way it is. And that's what all of these men and women have been doing in the first episode, of just opening up. And yeah, you have relationships where you don't have to be vulnerable because it is purely superficial and whatever. But these are the exceptions. Like, if you want something that is lasting, you want to be able to share everything with this person and come home to someone that is, if I have a really bad, so yesterday, not yesterday, day before yesterday, I had a really bad day at work. I just called JT. I cried about it. I was really unhappy about it. He was just
Hmm.
there, and he kind of witnessed it and was like, "What do you need me to do?" I was like, "Nothing. I just needed to say it." And because I was so, it wasn't really being vulnerable, kind of, but not really. But I felt safe in the fact that he was going to be there to receive what I had to give in a safe and comfortable way. And that's what you want in a
Yeah,
long-lasting relationship. And so if you are able to do that, I agree with you, healthily, not in a dramatic way, not in a way, attention-seeking way, of just healthily sharing
yeah,
your soft spots, and it's received well, then it's a good, it's a very good omen. It's not the only one that you need, but if you don't have it, then it's, red flag.
yeah. I think it first of all needs to be gradual. Also, to not
Sure.
overwhelm not yourself and not the other person that you're dating, and also to just be able to process it as you progress in your relationship. And it also has to be consistent. You were saying now that, you're almost 2 years, I think, into your relationship with JT,
Yeah.
having his child, and you're still being vulnerable with him in new and different ways. And I think that's so important to maintain a good, healthy relationship, that you can trust and that you know each other and that you're sort of up to date with each other's feelings and where you are and who you are and everything. So yeah, so it's like this process of like of continuing to be vulnerable, even if you feel like the person already knows you and they've already talked about it or they're already this. I think it's part of being in a healthy relationship. It's continuing to talk about it and continuing to be vulnerable and to not like, you know, get into this routine where you're eventually, okay, we had our vulnerable time in the beginning and now we're just in this routine and we each have our own thing. We don't need to be vulnerable anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's, you kind of, you know, it kind of made me think about these YouTube apologies or like public apologies. Yeah, it kind of makes me think about the slap with Will Smith and things.
My God, yeah, the whole thing is just ridiculous.
And sometimes, so these apologies, they can't, and you can tell that the person is just a, you know, I was going through a rough time in my life.
Yeah.
But Will Smith, it came out so insincere because he did exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Of just trying to be vulnerable, but for a specific reason and objective, which is like, well, that's not being vulnerable. That's you. I would much rather you say, listen, I fucked up. You know, I fucked up. I'm sorry. There's you know, I acted badly and trying to pretend that there's stuff going on is disingenuous. I think that's, you know, whether or not what he said was true, you could tell that he was just doing it in a way that was just not genuine. And that's not good. And I think that's the, you know, that's the thing. You don't, being vulnerable is not the answer to everything. Like sometimes you fuck up, you just need to apologize for fucking up. You can have your reasons for fucking up. You know, I was drunk, I was tired, he pissed me off in the backstage earlier, whatever, but I fucked up.
Yeah. I felt it was also a bit of like, sorry?
No, vulnerability isn't going to get you out of everything.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times it's also just to like, in Hebrew we say lisaben v, like to mark, to just check mark something off of your kind of list of like, yeah, I can say that I did it. I apologized, you know, I put it out there. And it's just like, no, that's not, you're not doing something just to mark it off your list to say that I did this. You're not being vulnerable just to show that you're being vulnerable. Because, you know, if it's fake, then, you know, you're basing a relationship on something that isn't authentic, it isn't real, and you're just trying to force it maybe, or you're just doing it because you have to, or you feel pressured, or whatever it is. And I think it has to come from a real place. And I think with the right person, it comes naturally and it's easier. So that's why, you know, I think you have to be careful with who you open up with and are vulnerable with. But again, when you trust yourself and when you're vulnerable with yourself first, then you also know how to make that distinction and how to, you know, control your vulnerability and not let others control it for you. And I think also, you know, when you're in a comfortable place, it's more comfortable to be vulnerable, and you have enough confidence and you've been through it all and you've processed it with yourself. So it's much harder for people to use your vulnerability against you. And it's easier for you to say, I was just vulnerable, I was strong, I opened up, and they didn't take it well, or they reacted immaturely, or they used it against me, or whatever it is. And you're strong enough to say that then the issue is with them and not with me, you know?
Exactly. As soon as you're kind of, it's a good way of saying it. As soon as you're sort of safe in your vulnerable subjects, then nobody can use it against you.
Exactly. And we can choose, I believe we can choose when to get insulted, when to get hurt. Obviously, not all the time, because we're human and we have emotional reactions that we can't control. But I think, again, when you work on yourself and when you take time to be strong and get to know yourself better and have a good relationship with yourself, then it's much easier for you to control your reactions, your emotions, and who has the ability to impact you and affect your feelings and whatever it is. And you're more composed and you have a better reaction to things and you just know how when to let go and things like that. So
I think that's a good ending note.
yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot to talk about vulnerability. I think even what that discussion you said you had with your not stepmother, your godmother, where even just that nuance of like the word and how showing vulnerability is actually a strength, but like, you know, it's a lot of there's a lot to talk about here, but
we are sticking to the program.
Yes.
Of not going all over the place. So go.
Yeah. Let us know if vulnerability comes easy for you. Do you think it's important to be vulnerable early on? How were you vulnerable in your relationships?
And I would ask women, how do you feel about men crying?
Ooh, that's a good question.
See how it goes in the end.
That's a topic in itself.
My mission now is to watch all of Love is Blind so that we can record, and so these will come afterwards, but I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. Anyway, like, follow, subscribe everywhere you are, anywhere you are, and
speak to you soon.
Till we speak soon. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.